Welcome back to Adaptive Humans, the podcast for real talk and intentional growth. I'm your host, Jami de Lou. If you were with us last week, you know we talked a little bit about the Q4 storms that can happen. Today, we're diving into what really happens when cultures collide at work and in life. And I don't just mean company culture or industry jargon. I mean the deeper cultural norms we carry, shaped by our backgrounds, ethnicity, nationality, our families, and so many things. They show up in workplaces as microcultures, like teams, functions, and departments. There's lots of different ways in which we can define culture, but too often we expect people to show up like whatever the majority culture is in any given situation, in particular in the workplace. When we don't name those influences, we risk misreading one another. What looks like inefficiency, disrespect, or disengagement is often something else entirely. That's where emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and nervous system regulation, the anchors of this podcast, come in. Here's the thing. Most of us have been socialized in our homes, in our schools, communities, and workplaces to focus on sameness and downplay differences. But minimization comes at a cost. Now more than ever before, we need to grow our ability to not only understand, but adapt across differences. One quick call out before we begin. When I talk about adapting across differences, I am not talking about tolerating or engaging in racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, or any other isms. I am focused on the very skills that create collaboration and innovation and belonging from our classrooms to boardrooms and in every community we are a part of. Beyond the bio is where we go deeper than the surface. Part of why this topic matters to me is influenced by my own upbringing, my own multicultural family and community. I grew up navigating very different cultural contexts, and I still do as an adult. At home growing up, my mom was a free-spirited hippie who gave me love and openness and extended that to others in my life. But other parts of my upbringing taught me to people please, stay hyper independent, and hyper vigilant. And when I was in the home of the elders who also helped raise me, I learned to honor their cultural norms, their rules. So whether it was my best friend's mom, who was a Black mother, and when we stayed at her house on the weekends, we had to go to church on Sunday, or it was some of the norms and traditions of the Latino parents that really influenced my life growing up. These different circumstances taught me early how much context shaped what was considered respectful, competent, or the right way. I can think about times in my life where when an adult reached out to a kid to ask them to do something, if they responded with what instead of excuse me, or if their response was yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. I remember teaching some of the young kids in my life, my nieces, and even my own kids, the importance of when somebody asked you for something with your response being yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. If you answered in that context, it's almost impossible to say yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, and it sound disrespectful. But if you say yeah, it can sound like yeah, or many other ways. And so these are some of the micro examples of understanding the nuances of tone, communication, ways in which we communicate with each other that are layered with different levels of respect, of culture, of nuances, of the way different identities and cultures and backgrounds expect children to adults to behave in community with one another. All of these experiences shaped who I am today. I know what it feels like to be misread or to have to translate myself depending on which room I'm in. I also recognize the privilege that I carry as a white woman and how that also shapes some of the assumptions too, both about myself and what I make about others. But I also know the gift of seeing situations through more than one lens. My lived experience, like most, shapes how I lead, coach, and even notice tensions in teams. For example, I once worked with two leaders who were stuck in conflict. One was pushing for quick decisions, while the other wanted more discussion before deciding. On the surface, one looked more reckless or speedy, the other looked stubborn or evasive. But underneath, it was cultural. For one, speed meant competence, and for the other, careful deliberation meant respect. Neither was wrong. Both were operating from their own cultural lens. This is where my work as a licensed practitioner in the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI, comes in. One of the most common places leaders get stuck is minimization. And minimization means what it sounds like, downplaying differences and focusing on sameness. It's when we approach each other with that mentality of, oh, we're all the same, or, let's just focus on what we have in common. And while I understand that that can feel like a common ground place, like, Jami, why would we not focus on what we have in common? If we don't notice some of the nuances and differences, we don't give space for others or ourselves to show up as ourselves. And so learning how to adapt across differences can really help us build those skills. And while that idea of thinking of everyone as the same can feel well-intentioned, here's the problem. Minimization flattens real differences in how people communicate, make decisions, and show respect. And the misinterpretations can pile up. Silence gets mistaken for disengagement. A yes can get mistaken for a full agreement. Direct feedback might be called rude. Indirect feedback might be called evasive. When we minimize, we miss what's really happening. And what's lost is trust, clarity, and connection. This is why developing cultural intelligence, or your CQ, is so vital. Your CQ helps you move from minimizing differences to bridging them. It can also support people's reaction and regulation, approaching with ease instead of hypervigilance. And it gives teams the ability to navigate conflict in ways that not only drive collaboration and innovation, but cultivate a sense of belonging and connection. Here's the brave enough moment. Even with my lived experience and professional training, I've missed the mark. I think back to a time when I was at a professional service firm. And if you don't know much about professional service firms, partners are owners in the business. They have an enormous amount of influence, power, however you want to describe it. And they could influence your budget, your project you wanted to get approved, and even someone's job security. Part of my role was to confront when a partner might misread a team member's performance or influence or help navigate when there might be a breakdown in communication. That's easier said than done a lot of times. Even with all of my knowledge, and often even without realizing it in the moment, I sometimes defaulted to appeasing the power instead of staying curious. Looking back, I can now see how my fear of authority and some of the veiled feedback could dysregulate my nervous system. In turn, I got rigid. I focused on keeping the partner happy instead of leaning into curiosity with the team member or team members. A shift came when I started saying things like, I may have misread this. Can you tell me more about how you approach decisions? Or help me understand how accountability shows up for you. These questions created dialogue, not defensiveness. And this isn't just across ethnic and identity and cultural differences. This shows up generationally too. Right now, Gen Z is entering the workforce, and many people are criticizing their approach to work. But I remember when millennials came into the workforce. They shook things up too. They pushed us to rethink boundaries, benefits, and how we worked. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had in recent months where people are talking about the ways in which Gen Z might be showing up or the skills deficits that they interpret them from having. And I have to gently remind people that Gen Z lived through a pandemic. They might have spent high school or parts of college either at home, in a dorm room, or in a room on a screen, not interacting with people. As a Gen Xer, I've often found myself in the middle. We're the smallest generation, and we spend a lot of our lives and our careers, especially, bridging between boomers and millennials. And now we're adding Gen Z into the workplace mix. But all of this has taught me and my peers, to my fellow Gen Xers, how to adapt across generations. And it's prepared me for the Gen Z workers that I'm collaborating with now. I will say that, and the Gen Z and Alpha kids in my life. So I want to ask you, where might you be minimizing in your leadership teams or your life? Is it across identities, cultures, generations, or some mix of those? Where are you assuming we're all the same? And what could you shift if you chose curiosity instead of assumption? That's the brave enough moment. Admitting we don't see the whole picture and choosing to ask instead of assume. Let's practice a reset for those moments when cultures collide. For our Just Be reset, I call this the cultural reframe. It's 4 simple steps that anyone can try. It starts with pause. Notice the discomfort. Maybe someone is silent when you expect input, or maybe someone pushes for urgency when you want more time. Before you react, take a breath. Breathe. Shoulders down, inhale, exhale. Regulate before you react. The third step is name the assumption. Am I assuming something? Am I assuming silence means disengagement? Or am I assuming urgency means disrespect? This is an internal dialogue that you're having with yourself during that quick pause and readjustment. And then lastly, reframe with curiosity. Ask a bridge question. I don't want to assume. Can you share what's most important to you in this decision? Or how do you usually approach accountability or urgency? These 4 steps help you reframe conversations and de-escalate potential conflict. And as always, let's try it together. Inhale through the nose, exhale slowly. This is a reset. Picture a recent frustration. Imagine yourself pausing, and instead of reacting, asking a curiosity question. That's how we regulate, shift out of minimization, and move towards connection with one another. Here's the takeaway. When cultures collide at work, it's not about difficult people. It's about unseen cultural codes. When we minimize, we miss. But when we name and bridge differences, we gained trust, clarity, and connection. So this week, notice one place where you may be minimizing. Try a cultural reframe instead of reacting in the moment. And let me know in the comments below or DM me, when did you realize the clash was actually cultural? What shifted for you once you named it? Even internally, what shifted for you? Remember, I am brave, I am enough, I am brave enough, and so are you. This is Adaptive Humans, real talk, intentional growth.